All right, so this video is going to show you how to set up a titration using the microlab. So here we have a microlab, right? And remember, we plug our microlab in. Come close to see the software here, right? Opening the software with. Well, it looks like our mouse is not working, so we're going to have to use the keyboard only. All right, but we have our microlab set up. We see this good sign. So, over from the drawers behind me there, we need to get a drop counter. We need to get a pH meter, and we need to get a drop dispenser. The drop dispenser, we want to make sure that this has a little tip right here. We want to make sure that all of this is on, so we've got some extra water in there. Make sure all this is nice and tight and ready to flow, right? Okay, I get out clamps. I'm going to need an S clamp, a pinch clamp. Where is the, oh, here it is. S clamp and a pinch clamp. I'm also going to need a stir plate. Pinch clamp here is going to hold the dispenser. All right, I want to make sure everything's nice and tight so that there's nothing flopping around. Okay, I have a nice stir plate here. I'm going to have my S clamp holding my drop counter. The S clamp is going to be holding the drop counter here. Okay, I'm going to position my drop counter generally below this. We'll have to make sure it's exactly right in a bit, but for now that's fine. I'm going to get a 250 milliliter beaker. The beaker needs to fit underneath there as well. The pH meter. I don't want to lose my O-ring, and I don't want to lose this liquid. So I keep this here somewhere safe, so I'm not going to knock it over on accident. My pH meter, I plug in like this, right? It might take a little bit of time to figure it out, but you can work at it there, plug it in. I gotta move this out of my way a little bit so I can put my pH meter through this nice pH meter holder, loosen this up to allow that to go in. And this should be just above the bottom there. It looks good. Okay. I have my counter, and I'm going to plug it in this spot right here. I have to be sure my microlab power has been turned on. Okay, so everything's going. I can put my, well, first I'm going to go over here now, okay? I'm going to go over here to add a sensor. Add sensor. I'm going to add a pH sensor. I'm going to click here. That's where I plugged it in. I'm going to make sure I click here for a pH, and then I'm going to go to next, and I have to perform a new calibration. All right, so I click perform a new calibration, and I'm going to add a calibration point. Now it is measuring the pH, hopefully the pH of nothing right now, so I have to get 3 buffers, pH 4, 7, and 10, and measure or tell the pH meter what the pH of those buffers switches are. Here I have my 3 buffers, pH 4, pH 7, pH 10. I have the lids labeled as well so I don't mix up the lids on the buffers. I can take this pH probe here and I can put it in pH 4 solution. Before I put it in there though, I want to make sure I have my rinse bottle and I want to rinse off. Here I have a rinse bottle with deionized water. I'm going to get a waste bottle too. Okay, so I have my pH probe. I hold it over here and I rinse off the storage buffer that it was being stored in. So I don't mix that with my pH 4 buffer. And then I put this into pH 4, I give it a gentle stir like that, gently stir it, and I watch my graph here and see how it's changed. The voltage has changed here, now it's settled. So I can type the value of the pH, which is 4 here, into this spot right here, and then I push enter, and now I have one spot on my calibration curve. I put the lid on the pH probe, just a second. Hello? I'm still working. Okay, great. I'll be in touch with you. Okay, great. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, so I have my pH probe here. I'm going to rinse it off. I just measured my pH4 buffer, and so I rinsed it off now, and it's ready to go into my pH7. So I'm going to add another calibration point. I click right here, no, sorry, right here. Add another calibration point. And now it's waiting for that calibration point. Again, I put it into my buffer, give it a slight stir, and allow it to equilibrate till it's stable. And then I put in here 7, and I push enter, and there's my second point. I put my lid on it. And again, now I have pH7 buffer here, so I need to make sure I rinse that off well. And now I'm going to put it into pH10 buffer, right? Again, same thing. I give it a little gentle stir. Oh, I forgot to put add calibration point. Add calibration point up here. Right, clicked right there. Now I give it a gentle stir. Wait for it to settle down a little bit. Stabilize. So this red line within the green frame shows that it's stabilized. I put in a value of 10 there, and then I push enter. All right, and now I have a pH probe that has been effectively, I have 3 calibration points, all right? Now with these 3 calibration points, I need to be sure I put in a first order linear fit. So I click right here, and then it adds a fit right there. All right, did you catch that? I added a first order linear fit. I had to tell it so that it can extrapolate anywhere between those points and determine what the voltage will relate to, how the voltage will relate to the pH. And then I say accept and save this calibration. And it's going to ask me what I want my units to be, and pH is fine. I'm going to save my calibration on the desktop, and I'm going to call it pH1. That way if my microlab gets disconnected somehow, I can go back to that and the calibration will be faster the next time. So I click finish. Now I have a pH probe ready to go. I can set it over here for a second while I add my next sensor. My second sensor I'm going to add is going to be the counter. I add the counter. It's plugged in right here. So I click there. That's all you have to do for the counter. On a pH, on a titration experiment, you want to make sure that you double click here where it says repeat every 5 seconds. So instead of measuring the instruments every half of a second, you want it to repeat every time the counter counts. So every time the counter counts, it'll repeat. So you double click here, it brings up this window, you click here, and then you can say okay, now you're ready to go. You just have to drag your pH meter over to here, you drag your counter over to here. So now the counter is your x-axis. You also want to put them into this display window so that you can monitor the pH and make sure that your pH meter doesn't lose connection and have a problem. I also put them in my spreadsheet here. Okay, so there we have it. This is our pH versus counts. Now I want to line up my counter here to make sure that it's going to drop the appropriate spot. Okay, to do that I need to put a liquid in here, and because, well, here I'll just put water in. So I want to put a liquid in here. I also want to make sure this is closed before I put the liquid in so it doesn't just come pouring out. And this might be my titration vial here, or vessel. So maybe I'll take my waste vessel and put it underneath here. Okay, and I don't need my pH probe in there for now. So now I can use this water to try to line up my drops. So I open it up, and I see that it's going way too fast, right? So this controls my drop speed. So I righty-tighty, turn it to the right until the drop speed is what I'd like. It's right about in the right vicinity, but I can see the red light's not flashing, so I'm still not counting my drops. So it looks like I have to scoot this forward just a little bit until I can see that it's counting every drop. And I can slow that down a little bit more. All right, so now we're all lined up. I want to give these an extra tight turn so that nothing changes. All right, so everything's set. Does that make sense? So now we have the dropper lined up. And if you wanted to calibrate your dropper, your dispenser, this is the point where you calibrate your dispenser, or could be a good point to calibrate your dispenser. And you can see the counter is counting here. All right, we're counting drops as they flow. Now I don't have to change this unless I want to change the speed. To turn it on and off, I just take this valve right here, and that'll turn it on and off, right? So everything's lined up and ready to go. So now I can give myself a stir bar. I want to make sure the stir bar is away from the pH probe. I can give this a little tighten the pH probe holder there. I want to make sure the stir bar is not in the way of the pH probe. So I just gently have the stirring occurring off this side, right? So now I'm all ready to go. I put maybe about 35 or 45, whatever my protocol calls for, milliliters of water. And now I could add my sample that I want to titrate in there. And then I could also change this water out for either acid or base, depending on what titration I'm going to do. All right, so that's how you set that apparatus up. Any questions about that? I think we got it all, right?
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Turn that off now.